Okay, so I see we have some in the chat already, and I'll read a few before we go ahead and get started with our panelists. I see, what's your favorite music genre? What is your favorite movie? What did you eat for breakfast today? Yes, very important question. And then one more, what is your favorite childhood memory? I like that one, very sentimental. Okay, so moving on, we'll go ahead and start introducing our panelists. So for our panelists, if you could start by introducing your name, your pronouns, the organization that you are representing, and one sentence talking about your organization.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jay. My pronouns are she and her, and the organization I'm representing is Abled Advocators. And Abled Advocators is a club that works to educate and break down negatively held stereotypes about disabilities.
Hi everyone, I'm Lila. My pronouns are she, her, Aya, and I am representing the History Student Association today, otherwise known as HSA. And a little bit about the History Student Association for those who aren't familiar. We're a community that focuses on, or that centers history through advocacy, civic mindedness, and cultural awareness, and in particular, the underrepresented voices in history. And we also foster we also have events that foster personal and professional development.
Hi everyone, my name is Janelle. I'm representing SCTA, Student California Teachers Association, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Our student organization is a part of a teacher union, but run by college students. So we help future teachers on college campuses, and specifically for Cal State Fullerton, to be prepared for their future teaching career and for the credential program.
Hi everyone, my name is Sandra. My pronouns are she, her, hers. The organization I'm representing today is Circle K International. It's a community service organization that focuses on service, leadership, and fellowship.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Halima. I already graduated, but I represented HSS ICC last year. So I believe that that is the person I'm representing today for the organization.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. Could each of you tell us how and when you got involved in your organization, and then what made you remain engaged as a member and later take on a leadership role?
Yeah, so for me, I got involved a couple years ago, and I was looking for a community that was welcoming and non-judgmental toward my disability. And that's when I found Abled Advocators, and I started joining their general meetings before the pandemic. But once the pandemic hit, everything was virtual. But I stayed because everybody was like super nice. I felt really included. Even if I didn't know everybody. And one person in particular was our former vice president named Adele, and she saw something in me that and encouraged me to run for president after being an ICC rep. There were countless times where people like her would check up on me, and their willingness to reach out and lend a helping hand has helped me to want to stay in the club. And from then on, I took on like 3 to 4 different leadership roles in other organizations, but I always came back to Abled Advocators. And I think it was because their willingness to be vulnerable in this club by being honest has really allowed me to have more meaningful connections in this club. So that's the reason why I stayed.
For me, I joined Circle K when I was in my second year. This is after almost 2 years of just living that commuter lifestyle of just going to classes and then going right home, like straight home right after. So I was really looking to get involved in something bigger than myself. So I was looking for things that genuinely interested me, which was community service and personal development. And I'm really happy that I was able to find that in my club. I know that, you could find this in any of the clubs that you're interested in pursuing or within your clubs, since you're all representatives. But, it was something that I really valued, and I was able to find a home and, make a family out of the people who were also in the club too. So it definitely encouraged me to take on more leadership positions, to inspire other people to, recruit, retain all of our new members. And that's how I got into, a club.
For me, honestly, I didn't even start as a member. So I started in a leadership role. And what happened was, so in the spring of, sorry, I'm trying to do the math. The spring of 2020, I ran for board of directors for HSS Humanities. And what during that time was I had to follow a lot of clubs on social media, just keep updated. So I am like following up. And unfortunately, I ended up losing the election by 5 votes. So I was in a really like just down on myself. And then COVID happened. So I was at home, I was feeling bad. I was like, damn, like I really wanted this because my dream was always to go to college and be in student government. So I was like, this is bad, this is bad. And then I was on Instagram one day and then I saw HSS ICC looking for board positions. They had positions available. And then I was like, okay, I'll try out for this. And if I get it, then maybe my self-worth wouldn't be so bad. So I applied and they were like, okay, we are doing elections. So what we will do is have you come out in front of the board and just introduce yourself and talk to everyone and answer the questions that we have for you. And so I did that and they approved me. And that was how I got started.
So I actually got involved with the History Student Association during, I suppose, the beginning of its reinstatement. The History Student Association, for those who aren't familiar, was just reinstated this last semester through Student Life and Leadership. But one of the reasons why I was actually interested in making that a reality, and I participated to kind of really move that forward, was because I am a history student on campus, and I think that one of the things that I really wanted to see was that there was another community that was kind of focusing on the things that I was interested in, and that for me was really learning about the history of minorities, and especially during this last summer. With things that happened and the very different and difficult political climate, I think that it was just very personally rewarding for me to kind of do something like this. And as for the second part of the question, which was apologize. What made me remain as a student leader is really, I think, just again that keeping in mind why I started this club, and really remembering that there, number one, that it's important to kind of talk about these things, but also in a sense to feel a sense of community. And that's what I feel that I really have been able to gain from the History Student Association ever since.
For me, for SCTA, when I transferred from a community college to Cal State Fullerton, I wanted to get involved in any type of club or activity because I kind of missed that experience at community college because it's very quiet on those campuses. So I wanted to have a few fun clubs and a few academic based to help me in my career for teaching. So I ended up finding SCTA. The president at the time was my best friend. I didn't even know she was leading the organization. So I was a member and then ended up getting nonchalantly on board to get to help, but then the pandemic hit, everything shut down. So all the goals we had in spring of 2020 just all was put on pause. And then deciding for the fall of 2020 to spring 2021, we wanted to revamp the club. It was kind of going up and down over the years at Cal State Fullerton. So we all banded together as just college students who were interested in helping other future teachers be more prepared for their role and to have a support system. So I ended up jumping on as president. It was a fantastic experience. And now that I'm in the credential program with one more semester, I'm not serving on the board anymore. But we did a lot of really awesome things for college students here at Cal State Fullerton. And we try to keep our members engaged based on what we learned when we were members at that time. So it was a really good experience.
Thank you all so much for sharing your student leader origin stories. It's very fun to hear your backgrounds. So for our next question, what have you learned about member recruitment, engagement, and retention during the pandemic? What lessons will you take with you as your group begins to return to campus?
So for me, like I mentioned before, I'm already graduated. So the lessons I will not be taking with me back to campus, but I think I'll definitely be taking them through life. One of the things that I learned, I think through it all, like through COVID and on the board, we had to recruit like 2 people because we had people coming and leaving and position switching. So I saw that happen. And I would say one of the first things or the most important things that I learned was that community is very vital. Making people feeling welcomed and like they belong, and that when they're with you or in your organization, that is the place they should be, is extremely crucial to not only member recruitment, but especially retention. So, and I think that's also something I'll take with me in life because, even if you go to work and right now I'm applying to jobs and it's like, do I feel like I belong in this job? And I'm just thinking back on my experiences and it's like, okay, I had this welcoming climate in my organization. I want to work in a place where I feel that same way.
Yeah, similarly, I also graduated, so some of these lessons aren't really applicable to post-grad life. But one of the major things I learned about member retention specifically is, I think before the pandemic, you're really focused on your events, you're really focused on what your club has to offer to compete against all the other clubs on campus. But I feel like this pandemic really challenged us to look within and really think about what matters most. And as Halima said, it's really about community, maintaining that community and making sure your club community is really healthy. And especially being president during a pandemic, you really learn to value that. And so you want to make sure your returning members feel appreciated, they feel recognized for their contributions, not just for their contributions especially, but just like for existing and, being a part of the club through a really difficult time. And especially, I think, another important part about member recruitment is you need to think about what is your why. I think that's a question people should really take into consideration when recruiting members. You have a lot of prospective students or prospective members who are interested in clubs, but they don't really know their why. So you need to make sure that, you can answer or provide an answer to that, give them a reason to stay, start their story somewhere, maximize their college potential and their potential as a human being. I think all of those things are really, really important as you guys go back to campus.
I want to just add on to what both Halima and Sandra had mentioned. One of the things that I found that was particularly important, and I'll definitely take on as we kind of shift back onto campus, is that piece of really communication, especially during the virtual setting. Communication isn't only really important, but it's critical to really understand what that's really what's going to make or break, in my opinion, the difference between retention and people kind of moving on with the club. Like Sandra mentioned, one of the things that is really important is also acknowledging people for their efforts and for really just showing up every day during this virtual setting, because we all know it's really difficult. And so one of the things that we'll definitely be doing as we kind of go back on campus is having these ceremonies where we recognize our students, whether it was for growing and developing or showing up every day. I think that was really what was important. And in fact, because of some of the things that we did during this last year, we managed to get two of our general members to finally join on our e-board for the first time. So like I said, I think that those things were really critical. And again, the aspect of communication and open dialogue with your members is really important, so long as you keep in mind that and being receptive to that feedback, so long as you do stay true to your mission statement and remember your why. But that's one of the things that we'll be taking with us moving forward.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Sandra, Lila, and Halima, they all said really important things about helping making others feel seen, or letting them know or reminding them how important they are. And I think during the pandemic, that's definitely something I've learned, is to really focus on how would you want to feel if you were a new member? Like how, or, you know, what kind of impact would you want them to make on you? Or, you know, what would you want them to do for you? So that's kind of how I would kind of take things on, and I would try to mirror what I would want somebody to be for me. But also, like what Lila said about taking other people's kind of advice and trying to have that align with your mission statement or your why. One example was at the beginning of the semester or last semester, a couple of new members asked if we were going to have a presentation about autism, and our schedule was already set, so we could not fit that in. But what we decided to do was try to be more flexible. And so at one of our events that we already had set, which was a film festival, we asked them if they can do a 10 to 15 presentation about autism. So we gave them a chance to be a part of the whole process of planning the event. And we also help give them a opportunity to feel like the information that they have learned from their experiences, that they can share that with everybody else. So I feel like it really helped us to it taught us how to be flexible, but then it also helped them to grow. And then they eventually are still in the club, and one of them is still an executive member now. So
for SCTA, our recruitment and retention are kind of different things in my mind. When we were doing recruiting, we ended up doing it as a big team effort. So our advisor was recruiting from different orientations. Us as college students and on the board, we're recruiting within our classes, since we're all in similar classes for teaching. So we did a lot of outreach, social media too. And then when we have people come that were interested, we did a lot of following up, which was something new that I don't think a lot of us on our board had done before. So we would send emails, and just like everyone's talking here today, making your members feel welcome, feel like they have a space. And so we did a lot of that for different types of recruiting, and then keeping members engaged. It was tough during the pandemic when it's another Zoom call to have to get on. I think that's what we always thought in our head, is we have to make it exciting because it's just another Zoom after a long day of Zooms. So we would really talk to our members and see what they're interested in. If they're really busy because finals is coming up, then we slow it down and we do more fun activities so you can have that stress relief. So I definitely recommend surveying your members too, because they'll give you really good feedback. And then we just try to make it really exciting for members and try to give them the information, because we also teach about different things in teaching. We would try to give them information that would have helped us if we were in their shoes, in their point of their educational journey. So if I would have known what I would have known at that time, that's kind of how we did it, is we would just give out a lot of really helpful information that we feel like was needed, or that because our advisors were really busy with the pandemic and everything changing in teaching, we would step in and fulfill that need and help our members out. So it's kind of just the best advice I can get is just meet the needs of your members, see where they're at and how they're doing, and make them feel supported and appreciated and having fun being at that event, rather than checking off boxes that the event's going well and you're doing what you're doing. Just put them first as people and meet their needs.
Thank you all so much. You brought up really great points. So I know you all touched a little bit on recruitment, but for our next question, you know that we're getting ready for a hybrid Discover Fest coming up very quickly. What tips do you have for groups as they prepare for Discover Fest and begin recruiting for their upcoming academic year?
For us, for SCTA, for Discover Fest, how we recruited was we used our Instagram account, and we would be posting updates from ASI about Discover Fest. And then also we made little descriptions in the stories that you can click to learn different things about our organization, like when do we meet, what do we do? So if someone couldn't come to Discover Fest, they knew what we were about and how we were able to connect with them. And then we made sure that our Titan link was totally updated with pictures, the descriptions, different events and things, and then just following up with email. So that's how we did it for Discover Fest. And it was pretty successful for us because not everyone was able to come to the Zoom at the time, but we were able to get the majority of our members outside of those meeting times by using social media and email and Titan link and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Using Tight Link is like your best friend. I'm sure SL will say the same as well. Yeah, Tight Link is really important since, you know, so many incoming students are using that to check out the clubs and organizations, as well as all the upcoming events that are happening on campus. So definitely leverage Tight Link to the best of your ability. In addition to Tight Link, you also have your club website if you have one, your organizational website if that exists for you, as well as social media. Those are really important channels to leverage, especially with promoting and doing outreach. Another thing with Discoverfest, so since I think it's hybrid this year, so you might have in-person tabling events. Don't quote me on that. I'm not too sure. But if you do, you know, be prepared. People will have different needs that you need to meet. Some people would prefer being hybrid and just meeting remotely. So definitely have, you know, options in terms of what you want to say when it comes to tabling. In your elevator pitch, you know, you really want to take into consideration, do people want to come to school for meetings? Do people want to just meet remotely for now? You know, have the best of both worlds, really take into consideration what people need in accordance with like their schedule and also just with everything that's happening in the world right now. Definitely prepare your returning members for the elevator pitch, what to wear if you know you're tabling in person. If you're going to have Zoom tabling sessions, that's also something you can look into with your clubs. If you're going to do online tabling sessions, you should also have interest forms. Those are really helpful to gauge who you need to follow up with. And you know, also you might have interclub councils, which I think, well, for Circle K, we had community service interclub council. So that was really helpful, communicating with the council board about when our meetings are and making sure that they could help promote our meetings too. So those are just a couple of tips.
Yeah, just a small thing about, I love what Sandra said about the sign up form. That was one thing that we started using, and we used like Google Forms, and that was something we weren't using before, and it was really helpful, especially like when we found that there were returning members, but we sometimes like we just see so many people that it's really hard to recognize people. But then when we have a log of everybody's names, we're able to recognize like, oh, this person has been coming a couple times, like maybe we'll follow up. So having that like that log on a computer is just so helpful, because you could do Command F or Control F to just find certain names. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody talked about in terms of you know, staying updated with all of your social media, your Titan Link, because those are all great resources. But one of the things that I think also Janelle mentioned earlier was that piece of following up. One of the things that we did at least last year, even though it was all online, the Discoverfest tabling, one of the things that we did that I found was really helpful was following up and ensuring that, you know, kind of giving the people that are kind of talking to you at these tabling sessions, giving them peace of mind that you are actually an active club and that you're kind of you're there to actually recruit people, and the things that you're doing are still happening, because there are times where even my own HSA members, they've told some of the e-board members, the reason why I come to your events a little bit more than these other clubs that I'm still participating in is because they see that HSA kind of follows up, whether it's on Titan Link after an event, or again through email, but following up, and then also again staying updated on social media. And one of the things that last I wanted to mention that we did for our Discoverfest is making sure that you have something that is nice and presentable that will kind of catch people's eye. We had like a very brief PowerPoint presentation that explained what we did, ensured that we laid out all of the details for people, and in that way, if anybody had any questions, we ensured that again we followed up, or people had a mode of communication through which they were able to through ask their questions, and it was, I would say that it was very successful in that way, because we were able to get a lot more traction, especially through Titan Link.
Yeah, with regard to Discoverfest, we did ours a little differently because HSS ICC is an umbrella organization. So we're not actually in charge of recruiting the members directly. We were more focused on recruiting clubs, and then the clubs could get their members. But if the clubs wanted help, we could always also pitch in and help them recruit the members. One of the things that we did for Discover Fest, it was just like everyone said, keeping updated on social media. We had a set time. We had a set time, sorry, we had a set time once every week where we would post only about Discover Fest. And then also what we did was definitely the emails. Part of ICC, I was specifically doing this, was reaching out to clubs. So we got a list of new organizations, and I would just send them emails talking about ICC and just following up with them constantly. And then when the day of Discover Fest came, we organized Zoom, and we would have people, we had all these different clubs on it. And when someone would come in, they would tell us what their interest was, and based on that, we would gauge them and then send them to a club. So that was pretty much how recruitment went. It's a little bit different than everyone else's, but what everyone said still applies. Definitely title link, Instagram, keeping it updated, maybe even YouTube if you have access to that, and email. I would say for student organizations, email is the most important.
And then one last thing that I wanted to add, because I was also on the board for HSS ICC during the Discover Fest period, is that what I remember, one of the things that we did that was also really helpful, especially considering that people had different time schedulings and weren't always able to show up to the Discover Fest virtual tabling sessions, was we had an additional Instagram Live. Now that format doesn't necessarily work with everybody. I will say that as a caveat, but one of the things that was helpful with is one of the things that you can do with that feature of Instagram Live once you post an Instagram Live video, you can also save it or pin it onto your profile. And that way other folks can, even if they weren't able to show up during their tabling session, after their work or after their class schedule, they can always go back and refer to that. And all we did in that live was answer general questions that people might have had about HSS ICC.
Thank you all. You all basically covered all the bases for recruiting and how to get around with Discover Fest. So I'm also very happy to hear that Titan Link has been such a helpful resource to you all. So hopefully folks continue to use that. For our next question, every group has meetings. Can you talk about the things your group would do during those meetings to aid with engagement and retention efforts?
For my club, this is actually interesting. During elections, during my year when I got elected, one of the questions that was asked was, how are you going to change the format of meetings? Because I feel like every year you can have the same kind of meeting in terms of the formatting, right? You can have your club updates, upcoming events, and then like a social, but there's not much else. People kind of know the formula. So one of the challenges that I took into my term was, how do I make it different for people to want to come to our events? How do I get people to not think of this as like a classroom setting? So what we did with our meetings last year was, if y'all remember like those high school pep rallies that have like themes around it, that's what we based it on. So every meeting had a theme, whether it be, can't think of any, video games as a theme, or like food or something like that. And so we would create a script that really aligned with the theme of the meeting, and we incorporated aspects of our club into the meeting itself. So it was very structured, very spirited, and people were able to, like laugh at the inside jokes or whatever, and, just take part of the spirit. So it wasn't actually like they were attending a Zoom meeting or a class. It was more like hanging out with like your friends while still getting the necessary updates from your club. And so I think, try your best to make meetings as engaging as possible. People don't want to be sitting in a classroom all day long. So, you have to be that break, that, that time and space away from class where they can be like, okay, I want to be here because I really like the people here and I really like what you all talk about. So
yeah, for us, for ICC was a little different. So we had like two types of meetings. We had the e-board meeting, which was very informal, and then we had the regular Friday meetings, which was very formal because we used Robert's rules. And so because of that, it was really hard to navigate engaging people because we had to use Robert's rules to get done because we had a lot of people on the Zoom. So it was like, you need to get on time. But one of the things that the director of administration came up with was, because she would do roll call. So at the end of roll call, she would ask people, she would ask different questions sometimes, like, what was your favorite candy? Depending on the season, if it was like Halloween, like, oh, what are you dressing up for Halloween? And that allowed like 1 or 2 minutes for just the people to loosen up a little bit before we got into Robert's rules. For our e-board regular meeting, we had them every Wednesdays. What we did differently was, so our meetings, I believe, started, if I remember correctly, at like 3 p.m. So sometimes if 1 or 2 of us popped up early before 3 p.m., we would just talk, just informal. You would say, just like how you would talk with your friends. But once 3 o'clock started, everybody would turn formal and we would just go by the agenda. And then once we were done with the agenda, towards the end, we had something we called roses and thorns. And that was basically, roses was saying good things that have happened to you during the week. And then thorns was something you were working on. And that was just a few things that we did that really allowed us to be super close with us. I would say right now I am friends with everyone on the e-board simply because of that. So I think if you could incorporate an activity like that to your organization, it would definitely be helpful and you will see a lot of changes.
For our club, we would try to have like a fun little icebreaker before every meeting, just for everybody to get to know each other. But I think one thing that at least our executive members, like we would try to do, is making sure we call everybody by their first name. So then I feel like it really helps to I feel like I'm saying it again, but it's really helped to remind them how important they are to us, and it instills a series of positive, and if you're able to instill like a series of positive feelings in someone every time you mention their name, at the end of the conversation they'll probably feel like really connected to you. And so that was a little something of what we kind of do. But I have to go because I have work, but I just want to leave in the chat a few resources that our club used. So I'm just going to drop that. But thank you so much for everybody for having me.
Thank you, Jay. Have a nice rest of your day and weekend. It is Friday.
Thank you. Okay, bye everybody.
For us, for SCTA, we really try to make our meetings worthwhile for someone to come, because we thought about kind of like other leaders are sharing on this board today, that a lot of the students at Cal State Fullerton are not involved in only one organization. They could be involved in up to 5 organizations or even more. So how do you make it worth the while that they're going to come to your meeting when it's on Zoom? So what we try to do was really kind of think about, when we were in Zooms, what worked and what didn't work. So one of the things that a lot of our leaders on board talked about is there's many Zoom calls that we went to that were really unorganized, and it just kind of made you just want to leave early. So we would try to think about those and tackle them in our meetings. Like, okay, well, we're going to have it super structured. We're going to have every board member having a role. Someone's going to be responding to members. Someone's going to be taking attendance. Someone's running the meeting. And we would switch those roles around too, so everything was covered. Our meeting setups, we did a lot of different meetings. We had fun socials, but we also had professional development, teacher guest speakers. But basically how we ran them was we always had a PowerPoint, and we shared those with our members. They could always go back and access them because they had important information on there if they missed it. We would welcome everyone, do an icebreaker, very quick one. We also would talk about all the updates that we have for the club and events coming up, and then that would start whatever type of meeting we were having. And then we were always mindful of everyone's time, so we'd always close out on time or say, hey, well, looks like it's 12 o'clock and the meeting is over. You are good to go. If you want to stay, we're still going to converse and have a conversation. So that would help so members don't feel like awkward to have to leave a meeting. So we would really just try to be mindful of everyone's time and run meetings that were professionally set up. And then one thing I do recommend, I didn't think of this until we were in the spring towards the end, was if you make all your meetings on PowerPoints, take screenshots of them on your phone. And then if you're comfortable with it, post it on your social media. So we would post the screenshots of like a printout view, post them on our stories, and then just kind of white out some of the links that that were only for Cal State Fullerton members. We didn't want to give that to everybody in the world. And we would post those and then put songs so you can read them like longer as you hear the song in the background. And those were helpful for a lot of our members because they said when they missed the meetings, they were able to see what was covered. So I kind of recommend that. It's something that if I would have thought of in the fall, we would have done it, but definitely helpful, and it's simple to get to do.
My club, I do want to say that HSA was a little bit more discussion based and also more geared towards presentations this last semester. But one of the things that I think that was really helpful in terms of kind of engaging people was definitely having those, similar to what Jay had said earlier, is having moments where you check in with your members, because at the end of the day, people are showing up to your Zoom meeting and they've very likely had a long day of different Zoom meetings. So kind of having a quick check-in that is a little bit different from the discussion that you will be having is a really nice way of giving people a little bit of time to themselves and to really form community, which has also helped in creating a more tightly knit community and have people return to our club. But also kind of within our presentation, we would have moments of, and I feel that especially during if you're going to have a longer Zoom meeting, definitely integrating moments where you have breaks and also different activities that you can all do together as a group is definitely helpful, because it allows people to, again, take a break from whatever different stressors that are going on, because again, we mentioned that there were a lot of different pieces and there still are a lot of different things that are going on in people's lives. So acknowledging that and ensuring that people have just a moment to be present and engage with other folks, because after all, they did come to a club to find a community, is what was really helpful. But just some of the activities that we did they varied, whether it was something like a little trivia night, or whether it was something like allowing people to come and to allowing people the opportunity to present themselves instead of hearing all of the e-board members talk all the time, was really unique for the organization that I was a part of. And I feel that we received a lot of positive feedback with regards to our open mic night, which is exactly what that was. The allowing folks who are members to really just present whatever it is that they wanted to present, as long as it was, relevant and similar to our mission statement, which was, again, focusing on the narrative of underrepresented communities in history.
Thank you all for your responses. So for our next question, we know that you all served in a leadership role when society was facing lots of issues related to social justice, right? We were dealing with the pandemic, issues around race, climate change, and a lot more. How did that affect your involvement and your student org? Did your organization address any of those issues, and how did you do that? Would you do anything differently in hindsight?
I think that I can go first for this one, just because, again, my organization was very closely related to a lot of the things that kind of happened. And personally, it was just a lot of it was a lot to kind of take in as a student leader yourself, right? So that was first thing. And I think what was really helpful for us in particular was that we had our mission statement kind of fosters communication about that. And so people kind of, we sometimes would take a moment because our presentation also kind of allowed for that discussion. We facilitated kind of discussions where we talked openly about these different issues. And in that way, we were able to, number one, form a sense of community, but also address these things that were kind of affecting us. And that's really what was critical, I think, in that situation, is really, number one, acknowledging that things are happening and that our sentiment, our feelings in regard to that are valid. But also one of the things that we did, aside from having those discussions, because that was only part of the way there, was on our social media, we would repost, even though we didn't always have the resources for all students, we would repost the student organizations on campus that had resources available for students to, and we distributed those on our Instagram stories. And then we also seldom had the opportunity to post more of those resources in our newsletter, as well as in our email updates to our members. And I think that that was helpful in again, just kind of acknowledging the things that were surrounding us, and also doing our due diligence to our members, because a lot of our members were definitely also affected by all the things that were occurring. But, you know, through that, just kind of building a sense of community and togetherness was really helpful to all of us, to help all of us kind of move forward, because after all, we weren't just members on this club, we were also students, we were also siblings, we were also workers, we were doing other things. And just, it was really important for us to kind of have that community where we, again, had a moment a quick break from all of the things that were going on. And I found that was also helpful for our community.
Yeah, similarly, last year was rough. Like, I'll just say that was pretty rough. For me, being president, it's really challenging. I think you can't really be something if you're not human first and foremost. So I think that's the way you should deal with new changes. Try to treat yourself as a human first instead of your position, and really think about, okay, how do I feel right now? And okay, feel those feelings out with your members, because more often than not, your members are your friends, right? They're your community. So really share space with them and have those discussions, but also be proactive with what you're doing. I think it's really not easy per se, but it's really common to be performative about things that you want to bring attention to. Like, you can have discussions or like talk about something once and then never bring it up ever again. But instead of being very performative, really take that change and do something with it. So for my club, we compiled resources. We also redirected people to resources that already existed by people who were far more qualified and far more knowledgeable to share that with a wider audience. We did a lot of fundraisers with nonprofits that our members really cared about, that pertain to the social issues that existed at that time, and still, as we as the club continues to go. And we also hosted educational workshops, whether it be by our own members or, by professional speakers that we sought out, because, at the end of the day, you really want to educate the people that you spend the most time with, and that direct audience is your community, your members. I would say one of the most helpful resources that I had during my year was my faculty advisor, who's also with SLL. Her name's Heidi Elmer. She was really helpful. She had a lot of resources that, and also just a lot of guidance, and made herself open to, talking to our board, which I felt was really beneficial and much needed during a time where you kind of don't really know how to act as a leader. You're a leader, you're a student, you're a person. So it's just, you're not really sure where to start. So, really tap into your resources, really rely on the people around you, and, do your part to educate yourself, educate others, and do something about it. So.
Yeah, for my organization, it was a little bit different because, like I mentioned, we were using Robert's rules. So I know that some organizations just did more of a discussion like based approach, but for us, we couldn't do that with Robert's rules. So one of the things, or a few of the things we implemented was after the meetings, we everyone on the e-board, or at least those who could for the day, would stay over for like 20 or 30 minutes. And if anyone wanted to talk about something, they had any questions, we would be there to listen to them and to help out. And then we also always make sure to share resources with regards to mental health, and just refer people to counseling CAPS. And then one of the things that we also did was our social justice facilitator actually came up with this, but once a month. So every month is designated like for different awarenesses. So like one time was Women's Month or something, I don't remember. But every month was different, and every month had a color. And so what she would do is just once per month, she would just do a PowerPoint and for like 5-10 minutes go over that month and what it signifies. And then we had like a little type of question at the end, which allowed people to speak up a little bit more. And then also another thing we did was actually to have Dean Fontaine come in twice for the semester in our meetings. And what she would do is, it would just be an open floor. So we would ask the students to express whatever they're feeling. It was mostly with regards to how they feel the university could do better. And that definitely allowed also people to express feelings that I never thought would come up, simply because our meetings were always so formal. And all of a sudden, unfortunately, some people were crying because they were going through just so many things. And I think that was one of the things that allowed us to really open things up. So those were just a few of the things that we did.
For us, for SCTA, the teacher union that we're a part of, which you're probably familiar with any type of union, is they get really political and they rally against things that they're really excited about. So when it came to political social justice, we let the union send out the things that they would send through emails, because you do memberships through them. And we would not push anything ourselves, just because as college students, every time we had a conversation about this once, that every time we were logging in to Instagram during the time of the elections, every single thing is do this, vote this, do this, vote this. And it tired us out. So we talked a little bit with our members about it, and they had expressed the same thing. Like, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to be swayed anything, because I'm already hearing it from 100 different sources. So we just tried to, when it was tackling things like that, we put out a mission statement for our club that all of our board members wrote and our advisors approved on as well, and put that out for our members. And then I know we're talking about like this in relation to members, but since we're all leaders on this call, think about your board members too. We had something where our union put out a letter of support for a certain organization, and they supported one organization, but they didn't support another. And that really hurt one of our board members who had a family member involved in the organization that was not being supported. So I was there to talk with her and to work it out and to try to figure out what we could do so she feels supported and wants to stay with us, because even though it wasn't something we put out, it's something that our organization higher up put out. So definitely listen to your board members and keep them supported just as much as you are for your members. And then I would say just have grace for yourself, because you're a college student. You're a leader, you're in classes, you're hearing all the stuff and watching the news as we all are. So you're not going to know how to handle everything. So definitely, like we were talking about, use your advisors, because your advisors are there to support you. I think sometimes as student leaders, we forget about it because we want to look like we're perfect and we've got it together. But that's not always the case when you're leading an organization. So definitely use your advisors. They're here to support you. And then they have access to resources that maybe you didn't even think of. So we definitely use our advisor for some of those things that we didn't know as college students how to figure out. And our advisor was able to help us walk through it.
I believe Sandra does have to head out. Sandra, if you'd like to.
Do a little plug, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm going to send one of the biggest membership, recruitment, retention tools that we use, which is our YouTube channel. So if y'all want to check that out, we put everything on there. So we really focused on content creation last year, just to subsidize, not being able to have in-person events. But if you would like to connect with me, after this is over or just in the future, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. But thank you so much for having me. It was an honor, and have fun with the rest of the panel, guys.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
thank you so much for being here, Sandra. All right, so we're rounding out to our last couple of questions. Thank you all for dropping your wisdom. There's so many things that you're pointing out is very helpful for the rest of our student leaders that are here joining us today. So our next question is, as we transition into the next academic year, what advice do you have for other groups who want to make sure their legacy continues and that their organization sustains after they leave or graduate?
One of the things that I definitely think that I learned from this last year that is really helpful for kind of continuing on your organization's legacy is being a little bit proactive about the keeping an eye out essentially for people who you think might be a great fit for any particular position on your e-board. Like I mentioned earlier, during our first semester, which was last semester, spring 2021, excuse me, we had a very small group of members who were in HSA, and we were able to get the two of those members onto our e-board this year, and we we did not lose any current e-board members either. But one of the things that we did during our last year was kind of, as I mentioned, keep an eye out for people who were just outstanding members. Like if you noticed somebody was always showing up or showing interest, that was something that we made note of. But also, and going back to the piece of the idea of communicating and having an open line of communication between the e-board members and your general members is a really great way to kind of find out if anybody even is interested in, because you won't always have people who are willing to say, hey, I'm interested in running for blank position. In fact, two of those people two of our new e-board members were a little bit more on the shy side of things. So they were interested in the e-board positions that we had available, but if nobody had mentioned, hey, I think that you would be a great fit for this position because I noticed that you showed up on time, you showed a lot of interest in our club, and we just think that you would be a great fit for this. If nobody had kept an eye out for those people and the characteristics and maintain that open line of communication, I feel that it could have gone a different way. But I think in that sense, with that said, ensuring that you have that you are also being open about the things that you do is also something that's helpful for people to kind of gauge what they are expected to do if they decide to continue on with the club. But as I mentioned, number one for me was definitely having an open mind about who might be a good addition to your team.
Yeah, and adding on to what Leela said, and also I feel like we've kind of already mentioned this before, but I'm just bringing it up again because this is extremely important in making sure that your organization continues. And so I'll share a personal experience. So in 2020, while I was the president of the HSS ICC, I was also a director on another e-board. I will not mention the e-board or the board, but on that e-board, so 2020, COVID hit. But usually before COVID hit, you plan out your whole year in advance where your budget will go and all that, because that's the way it should be done. And so this organization that I was on, we had already planned out the next year. But when COVID happened, I was like, hey, look, and I was the retention director. So I was in charge of making sure that people stayed in this organization. So I said to them, hey, look, I know that we already have stuff planned out, but COVID hit. Now we need to change. We need to do things that will actually support people. And one of the things that I brought up was doing like a drive-by or something where we could give free food to students, because we had a lot of students in the organization where when we were in person, they would only come to the events because we had free food. So I'm like, now that we're taking that away, we probably have students who are still struggling with getting that food. So let's make sure we can get that out to them. And although the people on the e-board said no, they said, no, we've already planned out our budget. COVID will only last like a month or two, which I don't blame them for thinking. And so they basically shut down the idea. And so in that whole time where they were planning for an event that was never going to happen, and they did not care to stop to think in that moment what people around them actually needed. And so what eventually ended up happening was I ended up leaving the e-board because it ended up getting to a point where it felt like I was being bullied because everything I would bring up was being rejected. So I ended up leaving. Unfortunately, they weren't able to replace me. And then next year, so this year, like January, early this year, I received an email saying, hey, would you like to try out for e-board? We didn't get anyone to apply. We didn't get anyone to sign up. And so at that point, it was like, you did not do the outreach. You did not let people feel that they were important to you. You were only doing things that you wanted to do, that you felt you needed, but you didn't reach out to people or do what they needed. So obviously no one's going to sign up. No one's going to be in the board because you didn't set an example. So what I'm trying to say is that it's really important to make sure that you hear out your other members. It doesn't matter what title someone has in the organization. Everyone should be on the same level. All of your minds are the same. Maybe your voting might be different, but at the end of the day, the ideas that everyone brings should be on the same level. And listen to people, like even if it's their first month in your organization, listen to what they have to say. And like Leela said, keep an eye on people. If there's someone you think will be a really good fit for you, just keep reaching out to them and let them know that you value them and the stuff that they bring to you.
I would agree to definitely mobilize other leaders that's in your organization. That's something that for us, for SCTA, we did, but if I could go back, I would probably put more focus on it because I put a lot of focus on trying to make sure that the Google Drive that we had was up to date. It had training information, it had videos, because when we started our organization in the fall, we were totally lost. We had so many struggles that our members never even knew because we did a great job at hiding it. But we didn't know how to do things in our organization or how to set up like a master sheet of hours, because our organization throughout the years at Cal State Fullerton, it's been active and then it drops and it's active and it drops. So we kind of saw that we would have loved to have had training and had the resources and templates that we didn't put as much focus on mobilizing other leaders. So if I could redo that, I definitely would go back to doing that, but doesn't mean it's not important to make sure that you pass on and you train your leaders, the new board coming in, because if not, they're going to be very lost if they don't have the resources. So I would definitely say that is make sure you mobilize other leaders that's within your organization and give them the tools to be able to succeed. And just know that you probably will mobilize someone that may never join the board, and that's okay. We all know as college students, there's so many things we have to balance on our plate, and adding something else on that you may have a certain amount of workload, but it will obviously change. That's really tough to do. So just be mindful that you may have someone that's a fantastic leader, but they just have a lot going on, and that's okay. We don't want to pressure any of our college students to take on even more, because when you do, you get burned out and it's not fun anymore. And your organization should be fun. It should be fun to be on board. So when it gets to that point that it's not, you have to reassess your goals too.
Thank you all for sharing. So before we go ahead and go over this last question, we do want to share that we'll take some audience questions if you have any. You can go ahead and send them in the chat if you have some in mind already. If it's for a specific panelist, please be sure to clarify that if you type it into the chat. And then if you would like to unmute yourself to ask the question, after they answer this final question, please use the raise hand feature just for the purpose of keeping our recording clear for other folks who might view it later. So for our final question, panelists, what was the biggest challenge in engaging your peers? How did you overcome that challenge, and what tips do you have for groups to prevent that from happening?
For us, for SCTA, and specifically for me as president, my biggest challenge engaging peers was not the act of doing it, but how much it took out of me. Because I had so many awesome ideas, my team members did, and we were sending those emails, we were posting on social media, we were having tight link going, like we were doing it all, that it did work, and we definitely raised our membership and we had more people involved, but it took a lot out of me. So if I can recommend anything, this is something I was thinking about preparing for speaking today to any leaders on this club, is do what feels right and do what you can. Kind of think of it like a birthday party or wedding, like you're planning a ton of things for somebody, and the more you put in, the cooler it's going to be for everybody, and probably you because you're there, but it takes a lot out of you to have to plan those things. So that's something that I struggled with engaging our peers, is putting in too much to SCTA and not enough into the practicums I was doing in my college classes. So that's something that I struggled with, is knowing when to stop and be like, okay, we're good, we've got enough, because I'm just a very ambitious person. So that's something I'd recommend, is just check in with yourself and make sure that you're not overextending yourself, because while we all want to have the best club of the clubs and we want to have so many members, we want to reach so many students, you got to remember you're human too, and you are a college student, your school comes first. So that was something for a challenge for me, and trying to overcome it is still something I'm working on, with not being so ambitious.
I agree with what Janelle had mentioned in regards to being realistic with yourself about the workload that you are taking on. I myself, I do want to share this with you all, because I am a perfect example of that. During the pandemic, again, a lot of things happened. So one of the things that was very difficult for me was managing, personally managing my time, in particular because I was divided not only between one club and one job and also school, but just there was a lot of different roles that we had that a lot of people needed to take on because of the changes that the pandemic brought. So being realistic about that, because you could end up like someone like me. Last year, I was one of the founders for HSA's reinstatement. However, this semester I wasn't able to do that. In fact, I am actually going to be on the board as a vice chair because I don't have, because my grade was actually jeopardized, and you don't want to get to the point where you jeopardize your grades, because that's your main priority. And also, especially during this time, ensuring that you are one of the things that I would definitely recommend, number one, is if you can at all delegate between different e-board members, and that's something that HSA did, supporting one another. That all the e-board members, they supported one another. If somebody wasn't able to take on a specific responsibility or a specific event that they were meant to, that we had all coordinated initially that they were supposed to do, we were all flexible and tried to help one another. But with that said, one of the things that I would do differently this upcoming year is, instead of putting all of the work and presentation, all of the workload on ourselves as e-board members, is trying to reach out and collaborate with different on-campus organizations that can help you. For example, we have the Dirk Center that can help you, the diversity, I believe it's still the Dirk Center. You have professors that might be willing to help you out with a specific presentation. You could have guest speakers, and through your, at least for all the clubs in the Humanities and Social Sciences College, you have HSS ICC, through which you can request a speaker symposium, and that is really just money that you pay to a guest speaker so that they can talk to your members, and in that way find a different mode through which your members can engage. But again, keeping in mind overall that things are not over yet, and it is really crucial for you to take care of yourself and your mental health during the entire process. And with that said, we talked about this earlier, but having resources available to keeping in mind that you also have resources available to you, such as CAPS on campus, as well as Fullerton at U. I'm getting that wrong, but it's u@fullerton.edu, I believe. That's a website through which we can all kind of, whether it's something that you just want to do a quick check-in with yourself, there are resources on campus, and be mindful that it's always okay to ask for help if you need help. So with that said, again, please take myself as my little experience as a lesson, so hopefully none of you go through it. It's really fun being on an e-board, don't get me wrong, but we do want to be realistic. And with that said, one of the things that my club did also is increase the number of different positions on our board, so that we can also continue to delegate and have more people that we can kind of rely on, that can rely on one another when if one of us can't is not able to take on an additional responsibility or take on an additional event. So with that said, I will be hopefully also posting some of those resources in the chat.
For me, the biggest challenge with engaging our peers, or my peers, was that we were on Zoom. It was kind of like we are right now. Like, if you're in person, someone comes early to the meeting, you could just stop by and chat, and maybe after the meeting, you could grab food. And even if you don't mean to, things will just roll on, and you start talking about life, classes, and things like that. And before you know it, maybe you even become friends, or they just tell you a lot of things where you can get to be really personal. On Zoom, you can't, like, you can still be personal, but it's much more harder to be personal. So the challenge that I was facing with engaging my peers was getting people involved and also engage at the same time. I realized that I'm repeating the same word, but you get the point. So it was literally just, people would be on Zoom, but would have their cameras off, and you don't know what they were doing. Maybe they were sleeping. And so it's like, are you there? Are you not? Do I talk to you? Like, what is going on? Do you want to talk to me or not? And so it was just getting that participation, simply because we were not there to physically see each other, to talk to each other. That was really the most challenging part. But how we overcame that challenge was, so whenever I would start meetings, I would ask for everyone to keep their cameras on if they could. And I made sure that I held myself to that same expectations. So on a day where I knew I couldn't have my camera on, I would let everyone know, like, hey, I can't have my camera on because of this. And what I realized was that people also started holding themselves to the same expectations. When people could not have their camera on, they would just text me in the chat saying, hey, I'm sick, or hey, I have a headache, or I can't keep my camera on today for whatever reason. And that was totally fine. And I think as the year progressed, that was one of the things that really helped us out. And also for me, it was just staying over after the meetings, like I mentioned, to make sure that people know you were there for them, whether it was in regards to school or not. That also really helped in making sure that people were engaged.
Thank you so much. So we are going to take a little bit of an opportunity for some audience questions if you have any. Again, if you'd like to unmute yourself to ask the question, please use the raise hand feature. Or if you don't feel comfortable unmuting, then you can go ahead and send your question in the chat, and then please just be sure to include whether it's for all of our panelists or just a specific person. And we'll go ahead and give you a few minutes for that. Don't be shy. Our panelists are nice. Okay, if folks don't have any questions, that's perfectly fine. I know they covered so much today, so it was very helpful. But I do want to say thank you so much to our panelists. So sad that Sandra and Jay weren't able to see to the very end, but it was very nice to see you all and to hear all of the things that you've learned from your student leadership experiences and how you continue to impact the community. So thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. And we have a lot of thanks in the chat, so we love to see that. I am going to send the link to the survey as well in the chat, so that way all of our folks here today, you can get credit. So please be sure to complete that survey for your attendance for LeadCon. And then our panelists, folks, if you have any last words that you want to share with everyone before they head out, please feel free to do so.
Just thank you for your time and for being here and for listening to us.
Thank you all for having us. I went ahead and put in some of the resources I know that you had mentioned. I put in, I think it's the longest list in there, so I apologize about that, but feel free to copy and paste. I put in information about my club and as well as the additional resources that I had mentioned. So hope to see you all during the school year.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who came today. Thank you to our leaders who were sharing a lot of awesome things. I wish I would have had kind of some of this during while I was a leader at the time too. But just thank you to all the people who are actually becoming leaders, because that's a big step when you're in college and you've got 100 bajillion things to do. So thank you for stepping up the needs for other students at Cal State Fullerton. And just remember to take care of yourself and have fun. You want to look back on this and be like, wow, it was so cool that I was on the executive board and I did all these really cool things for college students. But just remember to take care of yourself. That's something I wish someone would have told me when I started as president. But good luck. You're going to get it. Have fun with it. And then just roll with it. Roll with everything like we are in the world right now.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. So just the last couple reminders and some of the logistics before we head out. This recording is available on YouTube. So if you have any friends who maybe wanted to see this panel, they shared a lot of amazing advice and tips and their experiences. So highly recommend that you encourage others to view this if they weren't able to be here with us today. So that's on our YouTube channel. There's a playlist for LeadCon sessions if you're curious about others as well. And then we do have our Discover Fest webinar for student org preparation coming up shortly. So be on the lookout for that update on our Instagram. We'll be sharing more information on that as well. So that will help you since we are doing a hybrid Discover Fest this year. So hopefully folks have the link to that survey, but if there aren't any last minute lingering questions for our panelists, I'll go ahead and end this meeting. So thanks again for everyone being here. And I hope you all enjoy your weekend and the rest of your summer too.